Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network, a division of the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network. The following program broadcast is an original creation by the broadcast entity. Discussion within the following broadcast should be used for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice or consultation. Before considering application of any broadcast content in the following program, please consult your healthcare provider. If you feel you are having a medical emergency, please contact your local health services for immediate assistance. MS&Me Media and the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network do not guarantee or warrant the accuracy of information in the broadcast to follow. The Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network provisions broadcast services to program hosts. Information discussed in the broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or goals of the network and are solely those of the show broadcast host. Should you wish to host a broadcast, please visit our website at msmemedia.com and submit a request to become a program host. We thank you for listening to the MS&Me Radio Network. Enjoy the show.
This is Lean Into Lonely. My name is Kate Milliken, and in 2006, I was diagnosed with MS. I was 35, single, and I couldn't walk. And I'll never forget how lonely I felt as I came to terms with my new normal. Upon further reflection, I realized my whole life had been dotted with lonely moments. I was lonely when my brother got invited to a party and I didn't. I was lonely when I didn't get into my first choice college. I was really lonely when I got ditched at the altar 2 months before my wedding. And as a startup entrepreneur, now working to eliminate the problem of loneliness in chronic illness, I realized I'm still lonely. Instead of hiding from these moments, I'm taking the opposite approach, and this podcast blows open moments like these from people like you. This is Lean Into Lonely. So in March of 2017, we launched our 2.0 platform of My Counterpain, which was a huge step up from our prototype. And it came with all of these really exciting features. And one thing I was excited to have built into the platform was the ability to message certain specific groups of our users. So for example, you could send a message specifically to people who are angry or for people that had anxiety disorder. You also could send a message all pending on where somebody lived according to state. So I had an idea that I was going to bring together people from the tri-state area who lived with MS. And I sent out an email and I offered the opportunity to have lunch on me. And I sent it to people who lived in Rhode Island and Connecticut and New Jersey and New York with high hopes. I had this grand vision that we would end up getting a group of people together, maybe who had been really lonely, who had been debilitated. They would rally for the free lunch. There'd be lots of fellowship, and it would just be a magnificent My Counterpain moment. So I sent that email out to 137 people. And when the day of the lunch came, I arrived at the restaurant, and out of the 137 people I invited, only one showed up. My Counterpain MS user, Elizabeth Jones. Elizabeth Jones, welcome to Leading Into Lonely. I am totally excited to have you. I have introduced you to our audience, as this magnificent party of one that showed up to an event that I thought that maybe I'd get, 15, 50, 75 people. And I feel like I want to start by asking you what made you decide to actually show up at that event?
Well, I feel it's incredibly important. I don't understand how everybody doesn't share my feelings about that, but I feel there's great importance. I feel like there's a connection that needs to be made, and I want to be a part of it.
I have preambled you by saying that you live with MS, and why don't you give us a little background about your MS story?
Okay. I was diagnosed 15 years ago, and actually now I realize it's 16 years ago. And I first had numbness, the bottom of my feet, and didn't think anything of it. It took me several months to realize there was a problem. And once I did, I soon discovered that I had MS. Um, I I believe I was in denial for many years about it. So it was just recently, I would say in the past 4 or 5 years, that I have fully acknowledged that I have MS and really have started to have to deal with it. Um, I use a walking stick and I don't play tennis anymore.
What made you decide to change your course in terms of being more public about what was going on?
Uh, there was no turning back. There was a moment that I realized I had to say, I have MS. And it became easier. I was just talking to somebody yesterday, as a matter of fact, about saying, I have MS, and how many times I hear, you look great, which is such an unfortunate thing to hear. But anyway,
Right,
I just,
people think they're saying a wonderful thing to you, a compliment. But what makes it so bad to hear that?
I think that it's hard to hear because I may look fine, but I'm not fine at all. And it's hard to relate to people that do not have MS to understand what it is to have MS. So, does that make sense?
Yes, I think that the physicality and enormity of MS for some people, in terms of the symptoms they have, make them feel so miserable and so ill that it's a almost feels insulting for someone
Yes.
to just assume that if you look good, that you must feel good, and that on some weird way you equate really sick looking people to being really sick. But the fact
Right.
is, in moments of your life, I think it's fair to say, in light of what I know about you, you are sick.
Yes. Thank you.
You're you're welcome. And you may look great, but you are sick.
Yes.
What
Yes.
moments for you in that, you talked about that moment of being like, I need to throw this out there. Was that moment for you a positive or a negative moment to kind of come clean about your MS?
It did feel like a weight lifted off my shoulders, for sure. I, I hid it for years. I hid it throughout my career, and nobody knew. I landed great jobs. Nobody knew. There was no need for anybody to know because you really couldn't tell by looking at me, or even day to day at that point. So it was definitely a weight lifted to get it out there, to let people know.
Well, I would love people to know what your career has been about, because certainly some of it involves travel, which I think is very interesting that you say that it was never something that got in the way. So tell people about where you built your professional life.
Uh, for many years, I was working at Estee Lauder, and I was designing all the advertising. So I like to think of it as I was in the front pages of all the top fashion magazines. My work was.
Mhm.
And so it involved directing photo shoots, which involved starting with the sunrise and working until beyond the sunset many times. And then I went from beauty, fashion and beauty, to the hospitality industry, where I traveled a great deal, shooting or directing the shoots of hotels and resorts around the world, which that meant being outside in the heat for a long time.
Can you think of an anecdote where your MS and your work began to conflict?
It definitely, uh, standing outside in the sunshine for 12 hours at a time, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't stand the heat. I couldn't stand up that long. I would become completely exhausted, and it wasn't possible any longer.
And that was the impetus for deciding to come out.
Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely.
What would
Yeah.
you say in your career that you loved the most about it?
Those photo shoots outdoors, in beautiful weather. Although I would often joke that I would have a panda tan, um, which was the tan that I would have my face and my arms and my feet would be tan, and the rest of me would be white. So I nicknamed it the panda tan.
I
But
love that.
but I loved it. I mean, I loved working. I get up really early, and I love getting up with the sun and working until the sunset and capturing so many fantastic moments in so many fantastic places.
So, in the spirit of the theme of this show, talk to me about that moment with the interaction of your physical health and things you love the most kind of coming to a head. How did that moment feel for you, and what happened after you got to that point in your journey?
Uh, it, it made me very emotional. There were certain things that I couldn't do any longer, and um, it was inconceivable to me that how is it possible that I'm not going to be able to, I don't know, play tennis or um, go on a photo shoot like that? How is that possible that I'm not going to do that? It's my career, it's what I do, and I didn't know what I was going to do after that.
So, what happened?
I figured out, first of all, I stopped looking for work because that became um, very arduous. But I changed what I'm doing. I'm writing now, and drawing, and using other artistic sides of me.
Um, so, uh, if you think about, I think that some people talk about the fact that that moment becoming, in some ways, a positive catalyst. And it's actually been cool because I've gotten to see some of your art and see some of your writing. And, it seems to be developing in a wonderful way. Have there been silver linings that have come out of kind of that springboard moment for you?
Yes, I think that as a child, I imagined myself as a writer, and that I'm doing it now feels really good. Yeah, not only writing about myself, as you know, but writing a children's book. And although it's taking some time, and then deciding, because my friends kept saying to me, well, why don't you also illustrate it? So now it's become this um, really great thing that I've wanted to do and that I've dreamed about. And I probably never would have if I continued on my uh, creative director journey. And now it's given me this wonderful opportunity to have the time to write.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And what about the role of your friends in your life? How have they been important to you?
Um, they have been super important. It's so interesting because just today I spoke with a friend that I haven't spoken with in a while, who, first of all, hired me at Estee Lauder originally, and later came out and told me that she had MS, which is how I ended up with the doctors that I originally started with. And it's an amazing it's amazing the support that I have always gotten from my friends, um, from Michelle, who I said hired me, and my friend, my dear friend Kimberly, who I've known for over 30 years, whose mother had MS. and my friend Chris, Chris, whose father has MS.
Actually,
And
that's a great, I just want to say what a wonderful cosmic moment that was that you brought me into, which is Chris Sanders is an incredible photographer that Elizabeth worked with for a long time. And he's gone on to build himself an incredibly successful career. And as a startup entrepreneur, Elizabeth knew that I needed photos and needed a new headshot. And she pitched Chris on this idea of helping us out. And Chris came to my house, and we had this incredible day of everyone on Team My Counterpane getting a beautiful shot and taking these kind of, really casual shots of everyone together. And, all because of his father having MS and making a choice to do that for Elizabeth, who was lucky enough to spread that. And how those moments, I think, really bring you together in such a kind of intangibly wonderful way.
yes, I agree. And Chris is, traveling the world. I traveled with Chris for 4 months, and it was amazing. We, became really great friends, and he's just a great guy. So he was there, and I've said to him, I said, you would never have known that I had MS, right? And he said, well,
Ha!
there were a couple times that maybe, and there probably were, but I kept just shoveling them under the rug, I
Well,
suppose.
what I enjoyed was watching you guys. There were some kind of creative decisions that needed to be made, and it was almost as if you guys were back in your habit. Like Chris
Yeah,
kind of went to you and asked you questions, and it was pretty cool.
yeah,
It was really great.
yeah. He's someone I was always very in sync with. The real story behind my going on that shoot for 4 months. It was supposed to be split between two creative directors, and the client just said they only wanted me because
Ooh,
they saw the connection that Chris and I had. I think that had a lot to do with it,
wow.
other than my being super talented.
Of course. Of course, Elizabeth. And that talent still shows, for sure. So in the spirit of the show, the whole idea of
Yeah,
leaning into lonely, where
yes.
does loneliness come in your life?
Uh, I would say it comes in not, I would say being single, not having a partner, not having someone um, to be there for me or for me to be there for. Um, it's uh, it's lonely. There are moments where I am completely crushed and I just fall apart, feeling incredibly lonely. I would say my day to day, I'm good. I'm a happy, glass half full kind of gal, and um, but I do have those moments of complete loneliness.
And when they happen, I'm aware from being aware of now being a friend of yours,
Yes.
being aware of one or two, um, you know, how does one in that moment get yourself out of it? Because
Um,
one thought I
yeah.
thought was, wow, there's something really powerful about acceptance, right?
Hmm.
Of accepting, like, this is where you are today. And I think that, yesterday you and I were lucky enough to go to a conference that was being held by Tish and Saad Sadiq, who does a forum for people living with MS. Um, and us getting to be together, and kind of one of the things that somebody got on stage about was talking about that whole concept of negative thoughts, right? That you can let yourself go down a rabbit hole, um,
Hmm.
of thinking permanent, this is the way it's going to be. And I certainly remember, having been single for 13 years, of that feeling of just being like, it's over, I'm never going to, you know it's the end. And then you throw in a very slowly, if progressing at all, but knowing the kind of threat of progression, it can be a
Yes.
scary place to be in your brain. So talk about what that's like and how you get out of it.
Uh, yeah, it's interesting. I go back and forth between I'm great. I am happy to spend the rest of my life alone. I'm good. I have so many great things in my life going on that who needs a partner? And then I feel I'm a true romantic, and I would love to share so many moments with someone else. And I think that there are times where, like I said, I have complete breakdowns, and I let myself do it, first of all. But then I find, what can I do to make a change to this? Um, for instance, and you sometimes poked on by dear friends like you,
Uh-huh.
I find things to do, whether it's a cooking class, for instance, that I'm going to tomorrow. Or, like I said, I spoke with a friend of mine that hired me to Estee Lauder, Michelle, and turns out she's gone back into the art world and has a show on Thursday. So I'm going out to Long Island to see it.
Wow.
So I just don't give up and, crawl into a hole, the rabbit hole. I keep going and figuring out what I can do um, to keep myself occupied and busy and potentially meet new people
Well, and to be clear, I think it's fair to say that you do date occasionally, right? So it's
occasionally.
it's not
Yeah.
a lost, a lost art by any means, but it is
Yes.
interesting in those moments of knowing you on some level you have a sad truth that you're not happy about, and then
Yes.
within that moment you allow yourself a little bit of kind of exaggerative drama, right? This is how I felt. I'd be really feeling quite bummed out that I was solo. And then I would end up crying. And then within that crying, I would feel a little bit more melodramatic.
Yes.
It's like really easy in that moment that you actually let go to ramp it up.
Yes. I mean, there are times also that I say, who the hell wants this? Why would anybody want to deal with the mess that I am? Of
Mhm.
course, I'm such a horrible mess.
Yeah.
But, why would I want anybody to have to be bothered with dealing with that? I just, there are those times that I think that as well.
Right. Which, and for anybody that's listening that chooses to go onto my counterpane and do a search for Elizabeth Jones, you're going to see quite quickly that she's actually not a mess. Has her shit together artistically and physically, and has a lot of great honesty, actually, which I really appreciate. And I think that, in the world of MS, you can be so aware of the con of the illness itself, and
Mhm.
and how sometimes it feels like it takes over, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yes. And I mean, I do things like the equine therapy. So horseback riding once a week, which I love.
Yeah,
And I
that's been your
become
new love affair.
absolutely,
Huh?
absolutely. I do love it. And I probably won't ride in the winter, but start again in the spring. And yeah, I look forward to it every week. And it's great. The horses are great, and the people that work at Gallup are wonderful. So I'm glad I found it. I really am.
Yeah, I think those whole worlds opening is really powerful. So
Yes.
before we end this piece, I want to commit you to making a My Counterpain Moodifier post about your cooking class and what happened, because
Okay.
we're recording this on October 23rd. The cooking class is on October 24th. And
Yes.
for those of you that are interested in meeting Elizabeth or hearing more about her story, please go to mycounterpain.com, search Elizabeth, and there's a way you can go to her mood graph and search October 24th to find out what happened.
Okay. Yes. That sounds good. I can't wait.
And at the very least, we're going to ideally, we're going to get this amazing moment of somebody new that may be interesting that you met. And at the worst case scenario, we're going to get a beautiful picture of food. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Yes. Yes.
That's awesome. Elizabeth,
Okay,
thank you so
good.
much for being a guest on our podcast. And to all viewers out there, go to mycounterpain.com and let's keep leaning into the lonely.
Okay.
Later.
Later.